The purple gases of the Corinth Nebula swirled past the view screen like slow-moving ghosts. Captain Deho sat in his worn chair aboard the salvage freighter Void Whisper, watching the scanner display with tired eyes. He had been doing this job for 30 years now, picking through the graveyard of forgotten ships looking for anything worth selling. His engineer Hana called out from her station. "Captain, I'm getting something strange on the deep scan. It's big." Deho leaned forward. Big usually meant profitable. "How big?" 2 kilometers long. Maybe more. Hana's fingers moved across her console, pulling up more data. "The signal is weird, though. Not like anything in our database." The navigator Taeyang adjusted their course, guiding the small freighter deeper into the nebula. Minji, their weapons specialist, powered up the defensive systems out of habit. Space graveyards attracted more than just honest salvagers. It took 3 hours to reach the coordinates. When the shape finally appeared through the purple mist, everyone on the bridge fell silent. The ship was massive, dwarfing their freighter like a whale next to a minnow. Its hull was dark and corroded, covered in patterns that looked almost organic. Crystalline structures jutted from the surface at odd angles, some broken, others still intact. The design was unlike anything from the known spacefaring races. "What is that?" Minji whispered. Deho studied the ship carefully. He had seen a lot of wrecks in his career, but nothing like this. The architecture reminded him of pictures he had seen in history files, images of the Velthar, a race that had disappeared 12,000 years ago, long before humans had even invented the wheel. "Hana, can you get any readings from inside?" Deho asked. Hana worked her console for several minutes. "The hull is blocking most scans, but I'm detecting a power signature. Very faint, but it's there. Captain, this ship still has active systems." That changed everything. A derelict with working power meant technology that could be salvaged, studied, maybe even used. Deho made his decision quickly. "Suit up. We're going aboard." The exploration team consisted of Deho, Hana, and Minji. They crossed the empty space between ships in their EVA suits, magnetic boots eventually clanking onto the ancient hull. Up close, the corrosion was even more severe. The metal, if it could be called metal, had a texture like stone that had been left in acid for centuries. Finding an entrance took an hour. The airlock was partially collapsed, but Hana managed to pry it open with cutting tools. The moment they stepped inside, their suit lights revealed a sight that took their breath away. The corridor stretched ahead like a cathedral. The walls curved upward in sweeping arcs, meeting at a point far overhead. Crystalline formations grew from every surface, some glowing faintly with inner light. The floor was covered in a thin layer of dust that had been undisturbed for millennia. "This is incredible," Hana breathed, scanning everything with her handheld device. They moved through the ship carefully, checking each room and corridor. The interior was a maze of chambers, some small and intimate, others vast and echoing. The technology was everywhere, but so was the decay. Control panels had calcified into brittle formations. Conduits had cracked and leaked whatever they once carried. The organic metal hybrid construction had not aged well. The bridge was on the 3rd level of the ship. It was a massive space with stations arranged in a circular pattern around a central platform. The view screens were dark, but the framework suggested they had once shown a complete 3-dimensional view of surrounding space. Deho stood on the central platform and slowly turned, imagining what it must have been like when this ship was alive and crewed. Hana made her way to what looked like an engineering station. Her scanner was going wild with readings. "Captain, the core systems are still intact. Damaged, corroded, but intact. This ship could potentially be restored." Minji explored the weapon systems, her military training making her focus on the ship's offensive capabilities. "These weapon ports are massive. I can't even guess what they fired, but it must have been devastating." Deho accessed his suit's communication system and contacted Taeyang back on the Void Whisper. "Begin recording everything. Official salvage claim Galactic Salvage Law Article 12. Any ship abandoned for over 1,000 cycles in neutral space can be claimed by the first registered finder." "Understood, Captain," Taeyang replied. "Uploading claim now. What should I list as the ship's name?" Deho looked around the ancient bridge at the crystalline beauty mixed with decay. "Call it the Iron Lotus." The claim was registered within minutes and transmitted across the galactic network. Almost immediately, responses started coming in. Other salvage companies challenged the claim. Corporations demanded the ship be turned over for study. The Galactic Council sent a formal inquiry asking for detailed scans and origin information. But galactic salvage law was clear. Deho had found the ship, registered it first, and followed all protocols. The Iron Lotus was legally his. Over the next week, Deho called in every favor he had. He contacted specialists across human space, people he had worked with over the decades. Ji-Wan, a xenoarchaeologist who studied dead civilizations, arrived first. Then came Kyung, a quantum physicist who had published controversial papers about impossible energy systems. Bora, a cybernetics expert, showed up with 3 containers of equipment. Finally, Sang-Woo arrived, a former military strategist who now worked private contracts. They established a base camp inside the Iron Lotus, setting up living quarters in one of the more stable sections. The work began immediately. Ji-Wan started cataloging and dating every artifact and symbol they found. Kyung focused on the power systems, trying to understand what made them tick. Bora examined the control interfaces, attempting to figure out how the Velthar had operated their technology. The galactic community watched with amusement. News feeds showed images of the corroded hulk, with commentators laughing at human stubbornness. The Kravik Dominion sent an observer who toured the ship and declared it worthless junk. A Selkathi trade consortium offered to buy it for scrap value, which was insulting considering the ship's size. But humans had a reputation for not knowing when to quit. While the galaxy dismissed the Iron Lotus as a fool's dream, Deho's team worked 18-hour days. They mapped every corridor, cataloged every system, and slowly began to understand the scope of what they had found. On the 30th day, Kyung made the first breakthrough. He discovered that the power conduits didn't conduct electricity in any conventional sense. They channeled something else, something that existed in multiple dimensions at once. When he showed his findings to the team, even Ji-Wan was skeptical. "This violates basic physics," Bora said, studying the data. Kyung smiled. "Our physics, not theirs." Deho stood at the window of their base camp looking out at the vastness of the Iron Lotus stretching away into darkness. Somewhere in this corroded giant was the secret to making it live again. They just had to find it. The galaxy thought they were wasting their time on garbage. They would prove everyone wrong. 6 months had passed since they found the Iron Lotus, and progress had been painfully slow. The team had mapped 90% of the ship, cataloged thousands of systems, and understood almost nothing about how to make it work. Every attempt to power up even minor systems had failed. Kyung sat in the main power chamber, surrounded by displays showing energy patterns that made no sense. The Velthar power core was a sphere of crystalline material 3 meters across, suspended in the center of the chamber by invisible forces. It should have been dead after 12,000 years, but his instruments detected faint pulses of energy moving through it in patterns that defied explanation. "It's like it's alive," he muttered to himself. But sleeping. Hana was having similar frustrations in the engineering sections. The conduits that should carry power were corroded and broken in hundreds of places. She had tried to repair them using human technology, but every material she used either rejected the connection or crumbled within hours. The Velthar alloys had properties that modern science couldn't replicate. Bora faced her own challenges with the control systems. The interfaces didn't have buttons or touchscreens. They were smooth, crystalline surfaces that showed no response to touch, heat, electrical current, or any other stimulus she tried. It was like trying to use a computer without knowing where the keyboard was. The galactic observers who occasionally visited laughed openly now. News reports called the project humanity's expensive mistake, and proof that scavengers should stick to scavenging. The Galactic Council sent a formal recommendation that the ship be surrendered to proper authorities for safe disposal. Deho ignored them all. On a cold morning in the 7th month, everything changed. Hana was working alone in a secondary power conduit, trying once again to bridge a corroded section with human-made materials. She was tired, frustrated, and angry at the universe. Her cutting tool slipped, slicing through her glove and opening a deep cut on her palm. Blood floated in the zero gravity of the conduit. Hana cursed and grabbed for her repair kit, but some of the blood droplets drifted to the corroded conduit wall. The moment her blood touched the crystalline surface, something remarkable happened. The conduit glowed. Faint at first, then brighter, a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Hana froze, watching in amazement as the glow spread along the conduit in both directions. Then just as suddenly it faded and died. She activated her communicator with shaking hands. "Captain, get everyone to Conduit Section 7. Right now." Within 20 minutes, the entire team was crammed into the small space. Hana explained what happened, and Kyung immediately understood the implications. "It's psionic mechanical," he said excitedly. "The technology responds to organic matter, to biological signals. That's why our instruments and materials don't work. We've been trying to interface with machines, but this isn't a machine in the traditional sense." "So what do we do?" Sangwoo asked. "Bleed on everything?" Bora was already running calculations on her tablet. Not blood specifically. It responded to organic contact combined with Hana's emotional state. She was frustrated, determined, willing it to work. The technology reads intention. Over the next week, they experimented carefully. Kyung found that when he touched certain control surfaces while concentrating on specific commands, the systems responded. Not reliably, not always, but sometimes. Jiwon discovered that the ship's memory banks would display information when she approached them with genuine curiosity and wonder. The breakthrough spread across human networks. The Iron Lotus wasn't just a derelict anymore. It was a challenge that could potentially be overcome. And humans loved challenges. The volunteers started arriving. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds. They came in small ships from colonies across human space. Minsuk arrived, a retired shipwright who had built colony vessels for 40 years. He took one look at the Iron Lotus and announced he would die before leaving it unfinished. Yoonji came fresh from engineering academy, young and brilliant and eager to prove herself. Yoonyo led a team of miners who understood how to work with unstable and dangerous materials. They brought no corporate backing, no government funding. They came because word had spread that humans were attempting the impossible, and they wanted to be part of it. Daeho organized them into teams. Minsuk led the structural repair crews, teaching younger workers how to assess and reinforce the ancient hull. Yoonji worked with Bora on integrating human computer systems with Velthar interfaces. Junho's miners carefully extracted samples of the crystalline materials and experimented with creating hybrid alloys. The work became a bizarre fusion of ancient and modern. Where Velthar circuits had corroded beyond repair, they soldered in human alternatives. Where crystalline processors had shattered, they bridged the gaps with quantum cores scavenged from junkyards and old military hardware. The ship slowly became something new, something that had never existed before, a hybrid of two civilizations separated by 12,000 years. Minji focused her attention on the weapons systems. The weapon ports were massive, leading to chambers deep in the ship's hull. The firing mechanisms were intact but dormant. She worked with Sangwoo to understand not just how they worked, but what they fired. The answer, when they finally understood it, was terrifying. The Velthar weapons didn't fire projectiles or energy beams. They manipulated space-time itself, creating dimensional rifts that caused matter to fold in on itself and disappear. The math was horrifying. A single shot could potentially erase a ship from existence, leaving not even debris behind. "We need to be very careful with these," Sangwoo said, studying the tactical systems. "This isn't just a weapon. It's a way to remove things from reality." After 18 months of continuous work, they were ready for the first full power-up test. Hyung stood before the main power core, surrounded by the entire team. They had repaired or replaced thousands of systems. They had integrated human technology throughout the ship. They had literally bled into the vessel, leaving traces of their DNA in the psionic interfaces. "Everyone ready?" Kyung asked. Daeho stood on the bridge, his hand on the captain's station. "Do it!" Kyung placed both hands on the power core control interface and focused every ounce of will into a single thought. "Wake up," the core responded. The faint pulses of energy became stronger, faster. The crystalline sphere began to glow from within, soft blue light building to brilliant white. Power surged through repaired conduits, through hybrid connections, through systems that had been dead for 12 millennia. Lights flickered on throughout the ship. The hum of generators resonated through the hull, a deep sound that could be felt in bones and teeth. Displays activated, showing information in Velthar script that slowly shifted to human languages as the integrated systems learned. The bridge view screens came alive, showing a complete three-dimensional view of the surrounding space. The Iron Lotus was alive, but it was hungry. Power consumption was massive, unstable. Systems flickered on and off randomly. Alarms sounded in sections where the hybrid technology wasn't quite compatible. Daeho watched his displays carefully, seeing the ship struggle like a newborn trying to breathe for the first time. "Stabilize the power flow," he ordered. "All teams report status." It took 6 hours to bring everything under control. They had to shut down non-essential systems, reroute power through more stable pathways, and manually adjust thousands of connections. But when the work was done, the Iron Lotus was running at 40% capacity. The ship that everyone said was worthless garbage was now operational. Deho stood alone on the bridge late that night, looking at the stars through the view screen. The ship hummed around him, alive and waiting. They had done it. They had taken something the galaxy had left to corrode and turned it into something new, but he knew this was just the beginning. The hard part was still to come. The news of the Iron Lotus power-up spread across the galaxy like wildfire. What had been dismissed as human foolishness was now being watched with growing concern. A dead Velthar ship was interesting to archaeologists. A living one was a potential threat to everyone. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from 40 species gathered to discuss what should be done about humanity's discovery. The Selkathi delegates argued that such dangerous technology should be controlled by the Council. The Varine suggested the ship be destroyed before humans learn to fully utilize it. Only a few voices spoke in humanity's defense. Deho watched the proceedings through a live feed, his jaw clenched in anger. "They're talking about us like we're children playing with fire." G1 stood beside him, her expression thoughtful. "To them we are. Humans have only been in space for 200 years. Most of these species have been spacefaring for thousands. They see us as dangerous newcomers." The Kravik Dominion was the loudest voice in the council. They were a militaristic empire controlling 40 systems, and they viewed the Iron Lotus as an unacceptable shift in galactic power. Their ambassador, a massive creature covered in blue-black scales, made a formal demand that the ship be surrendered to Kravik control for proper study and containment. Deho's response was short and direct. No. That single word started a diplomatic crisis. The Kravik ambassador threatened sanctions against human worlds. Trade routes that had recently opened to human merchants were suddenly closed. Human ships were turned away from ports they had visited for years. The pressure was economic at first, but everyone knew it could become military if pushed too far. Sang-Woo suggested a demonstration. If they're going to fear the ship anyway, let's show them why they should be afraid. Make it clear that attacking us would be a mistake. The team debated for days. Showing the ship's weapons might deter aggression, or it might provoke it, but doing nothing would make them look weak. Finally, Deho agreed. They would conduct a weapons test in an empty system, and they would invite observers from every major power to witness it. The test was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In that time, the Iron Lotus was moved to an uninhabited system on the edge of Kravik space. The target was a moon-sized asteroid, dense with iron and nickel. Observation ships from a dozen species positioned themselves at a safe distance. Minji took control of the weapon systems. She had spent months studying the Velthar firing mechanisms, learning how to safely activate and aim them. The targeting computer, now integrated with human AI, locked onto the asteroid with perfect precision. "Weapon charged and ready," she reported. Deho sat in the captain's chair, very aware that the entire galaxy was watching. Fire. The Iron Lotus didn't shake or recoil. There was no dramatic flash of light or thunderous sound. The weapon simply activated, creating a rift in space-time that connected 2 points in reality that should never touch. The asteroid didn't explode. It didn't shatter into pieces. It simply ceased to exist. One moment, there was a solid mass of rock and metal 300 kilometers in diameter. The next moment, there was nothing. Not even debris. Just a faint gravitational echo where the asteroid used to be. A ripple in space that would fade within hours. The observation ships scattered in panic. Even species that had seen centuries of warfare had never witnessed anything like that. The Kravik observers jumped to faster-than-light speed so quickly they left scorch marks in local space. The demonstration achieved its goal, but not the way Deho had hoped. Instead of earning respect, the Iron Lotus earned fear. And fear, as humans had learned throughout history, often led to violence. The Galactic Council passed an emergency resolution declaring the Iron Lotus a threat to galactic stability. Economic sanctions against humanity became universal. Human colonies that depended on trade began to suffer. Protests erupted on Earth and the outer worlds, with citizens demanding their government force Deho to surrender the ship. The assassination attempt started 2 weeks after the demonstration. The first was a hired killer, who tried to sabotage the ship's life support. Minji caught him and turned him over to human authorities. The second was a small group of corporate mercenaries who attempted to board during a supply run. They were captured after a brief firefight. The third attempt was more serious. A religious faction called the Purifiers, who believed that Velthar technology was cursed by ancient gods, sent a suicide bomber. He made it into the ship's market district before Sangwoo's security teams identified him. The explosion killed the bomber and injured 3 crew members. It could have been much worse. Daeho's coalition began to fracture under the pressure. Some volunteers left, unable to handle the constant threat. Others stayed but argued for surrender. The dream that had united them was being crushed by political and economic reality. Then the Kravik Dominion issued their ultimatum. The message was delivered through official diplomatic channels and broadcast on every news network in known space. Surrender the Iron Lotus within 30 standard cycles or face military action. To emphasize their seriousness, they assembled a fleet of 200 warships in a nearby system. Hana watched the news reports with growing dread. 200 ships. Captain, we can't fight that. We have 1 ship, barely tested with a crew of mostly civilians. We're not warriors, Yunji added. We're engineers and scientists. Daeho looked at his core team, the people who had been with him from the beginning. Hana, who had discovered how to awaken the ship. Kyung, who had unlocked its power systems. Bora, who had bridged human and alien technology. Minji and Sangwoo, who had kept them safe through everything. Jiwon, who had helped them understand what they had found. What do we do? He asked them. Do we give up 18 months of work? Do we let them take what we built? Jiwon spoke first. The Velthar didn't build this ship to be a weapon of conquest. I've been studying the archive data. They were explorers, philosophers. This ship was meant to protect and discover, not to dominate. Kyung nodded. But they also built it to survive. The systems are designed for extreme circumstances. They expected their ships to face threats. Minji checked her weapons display. We have advantages they don't understand. The dimensional weapons, the ability to phase through normal space. The hybrid systems that don't match anything in their tactical databases. Sangwoo pulled up star maps and began plotting strategies. We can't face them in open battle. But we don't have to. We choose the battlefield, use the nebula and gravity wells, hit-and-run tactics. Bora was already working on combat system integrations. I can link the human combat AI with the Velthar tactical systems. It'll be crude, but it might work. Daeho looked at each of them, seeing determination in their eyes despite the fear. They were scared, so was he. But they were also stubborn and angry and unwilling to let bullies take what they had earned. We have 30 cycles, he said. We use every minute of it. Sangwoo work with Taeyang to map every tactical advantage within 50 light years. Minji drill the weapon crews until they can fire in their sleep. Bora, make our systems combat ready. Hana and Kyung, I need maximum power and stability from the engines and weapons. He stood up, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders. Jiwon, dig into those Velthar combat archives. Find out how they fought their wars. The team scattered to their tasks. Through the view screen, Daeho could see the distant stars where the Kravik fleet waited. 200 warships against 1. The galaxy would call it suicide. Humans would call it Tuesday. The 30 cycles passed too quickly. The Iron Lotus crew worked around the clock preparing for a battle that military experts across the galaxy said they couldn't win. But humans had a long history of winning fights they shouldn't. Jiwon made a crucial discovery in the Velthar archives. The ancient race hadn't just been peaceful explorers. They had fought wars against threats that made the Kravik look like children with toys. Their combat doctrine was based on a simple principle. Never fight fair. Use every advantage, exploit every weakness, and survive by any means necessary. Sangwoo built his strategy around that philosophy. The Iron Lotus couldn't match the Kravik fleet in firepower or numbers, but it didn't need to. The battle would take place in the Corinth Nebula, where the Iron Lotus had been found. Taeyang knew every gravity well, every gas cloud, every asteroid field. The Kravik would be fighting blind in terrain that the humans knew perfectly. When the Kravik fleet emerged from jump space, they came in perfect military formation. 200 warships, each a kilometer long and bristling with weapons. They had enough firepower to level a planet. Their admiral, a veteran of 30 campaigns, felt confident in an easy victory. Daeho watched them approach on his displays. He sat in the captain's chair with his small crew of 40 humans scattered throughout the ship. Against thousands of Kravik warriors, it seemed absurd, but appearances could be deceiving. All stations. Battle ready, he ordered calmly. The Kravik fleet advanced slowly, scanning for the Iron Lotus. They found it near the heart of the nebula, apparently alone and vulnerable. The admiral ordered half his fleet to surround the human ship, while the other half maintained a perimeter. It was textbook tactics for overwhelming a single vessel. That's when Sang-Woo's plan began. Minji fired the first shot, targeting a Kravik battleship at the edge of their formation. The dimensional weapon created a rift and the battleship simply disappeared. No explosion, no debris, just gone. Before the Kravik could react, the Iron Lotus phased out of normal space. The Velthar technology allowed the ship to exist partially in another dimension for short periods. To Kravik sensors, it looked like the ship had simply vanished. When it reappeared 3 seconds later, it was 20 kilometers away with perfect firing position on 5 more ships. Minji fired again, and again. Each shot erased a Kravik vessel from existence. The enemy fleet broke formation, trying to track a target that appeared and disappeared randomly. Their weapons fired at empty space where the Iron Lotus had been moments before. Kyung pushed the power systems to their limits. The hybrid human Velthar engines screamed under the load, but they held. Hana monitored every connection, every conduit, ready to reroute power the instant something failed. The ship wasn't designed for this kind of combat stress, but it was holding together through sheer human stubbornness and constant adjustment. The battle quickly became chaos. Sang-Woo used the nebula's gas clouds to hide the ship's movements. He lured Kravik vessels into gravity wells that threw off their targeting. He created spatial anomalies with the dimensional weapons, then led enemy ships directly into them. But the Kravik weren't helpless. They adapted quickly, spreading their fleet and creating overlapping sensor nets. Their admiral was good at his job. He realized conventional tactics wouldn't work, and ordered his ships to fire blindly into areas where the Iron Lotus might appear. It was wasteful, but with 200 ships he could afford to waste ammunition. A plasma burst caught the Iron Lotus on its port side, overwhelming the shields. The ship shuddered violently. Damage reports flooded in. Hull breach in Section 7. Power conduit failure on Deck 3. Life support offline in the forward quarters. Repair teams move, Hana shouted into her communicator. Yoonji led a crew of engineers to the breached section, carrying welding equipment and hull plates scavenged from a dozen different sources. They worked while the battle raged around them, sealing holes while weapon fire streaked past outside. When the welding torches failed, they used emergency sealant. When that ran out, they welded plates directly over the breaches with cutting tools never meant for that purpose. Junho's mining crew handled the power failures. They rerouted energy through maintenance conduits, through ventilation systems, through any pathway that could carry a current. The solutions were crude and temporary, but they worked long enough to keep fighting. The turning point came an hour into the battle. 50 Kravik ships had been destroyed or disabled. Their admiral was enraged and desperate. He ordered a ramming attack, 20 ships accelerating at maximum speed directly toward the Iron Lotus. Daeho saw them coming. At those speeds and that distance, there wasn't time to phase out. The shields couldn't stop that much mass. They had seconds to make a decision. He made it. Helm, full speed toward the star. Maximum acceleration. Taeyang's hands flew across his controls. Captain, the radiation will kill us. Trust me, do it. The Iron Lotus turned and accelerated toward the nearby star, a yellow dwarf that painted the nebula with its light. The pursuing Kravik ships followed, confident they had the human vessel trapped. The admiral smiled, certain of victory. Hana understood Daeho's plan a split second before it happened. Shields to maximum forward. Reconfigure for stellar radiation absorption. The Iron Lotus plunged into the star's corona, the outermost layer of its atmosphere. The temperature was over 1,000,000 degrees. Radiation levels should have fried every system and killed everyone aboard in seconds. But Hana had spent months studying how the Velthar shields worked. They didn't just block radiation, they absorbed and converted certain types of energy. The ship's shields glowed white-hot as they drank in the stellar radiation and fed it directly into the power systems. The Iron Lotus became supercharged, its weapons and engines running at levels far beyond normal capacity. It emerged from the corona like a mythical phoenix reborn in fire. The Kravik ships that had followed couldn't adjust their shields in time. The stellar radiation overwhelmed their systems. 20 ships died in the corona, their crews boiled alive in their armor. Minji didn't waste the opportunity. With weapons charged beyond maximum, she fired a continuous barrage. The dimensional rifts tore through space, erasing Kravik vessels one after another. The surviving enemy ships scattered in panic, their formation completely broken. The battle lasted 6 hours in total. When the Kravik fleet finally retreated, they left 73 destroyed ships behind and over 100 damaged beyond combat capability. The Iron Lotus hung in space, battered and scarred but intact. The human crew paid their price too. 12 people were dead, killed when a section decompressed before it could be sealed. 23 were injured, some seriously. Daeho walked through the ship's corridors, seeing the damage and the exhausted faces of his crew. That evening, he held a memorial service in the observation deck. The 12 dead were committed to space, their bodies wrapped in simple cloth and released into the void. Daeho spoke their names aloud, making sure the galaxy would remember them. They had been engineers and technicians, volunteers who came to build something amazing. They died as warriors, defending what they created. The battle had been recorded by dozens of sensor stations across multiple systems. Within hours, the footage was spreading through every network in known space. Species that had dismissed humanity watched in stunned silence as a single human vessel defeated a fleet that should have crushed it. The Kravik Dominion was humiliated. Their ambassador resigned in disgrace. Their military leaders were called before their government to explain the defeat. The empire that had threatened humanity now looked weak and foolish, but more importantly, humanity's reputation changed. They were no longer seen as lucky scavengers or foolish dreamers. They were warriors who had taken something the galaxy left to rot and turned it into the deadliest ship alive. Daeho stood on the bridge late that night, looking at damage reports and repair schedules. The Iron Lotus would need months of work to fully recover, but it had survived. They all had. Was it worth it? Hana asked quietly, standing beside him. Daeho thought about the 12 people they had lost, about the volunteers who had come from across human space to make this impossible dream real, about what the Iron Lotus represented to humanity and the galaxy. "Ask me again when we're done," he said. The Galactic Council met in emergency session for the second time in 3 months. But this time the tone was very different. The species that had demanded the Iron Lotus be destroyed now spoke carefully, respectfully. The Kravik representative, a replacement for the disgraced ambassador, didn't make demands. He made requests. Daeho attended the session remotely, his image transmitted from the bridge of the Iron Lotus. Behind him, repair crews could be seen working to fix battle damage. He listened as species after species offered apologies for their earlier positions. They offered trade agreements, technology exchanges, and military alliances. The Selkathi delegate, who had called the ship worthless garbage just months ago, now praised human ingenuity and determination. The Varine, who had suggested destroying the ship, now asked permission to study its hybrid systems. Everyone wanted something from humanity now. Daeho listened to it all with a tired expression. When they finally asked him what humanity wanted in exchange for access to Velthar technology, his answer surprised them. "We want to share it," he said simply. The council chambers fell silent. Sharing was not how galactic politics usually worked. Technology was hoarded, used for advantage, sold for profit. Species didn't just give away their secrets. The Velthar left the ship for a reason, Daeho continued. Not as a weapon, but as a teacher. We're willing to open the Iron Lotus as a research vessel. Scientists from any species can apply to study here. Under human supervision, we share what we learn, and everyone benefits. The proposal was radical, but the galaxy had just watched humans defeat an empire. Nobody wanted to argue. Within a week, the first research teams began arriving. Jiwon took charge of the initiative, establishing protocols and safety procedures. The market district that had been bombed was rebuilt as a residential section for visiting scientists. The work of truly understanding the Iron Lotus began in earnest. With researchers from 40 different species contributing their expertise, discoveries came faster than ever. Bora led a team that figured out how to safely integrate psionic interfaces with conventional computers. Kyung worked with Varine physicists to map the dimensional folding that powered the ship. The medical applications came as a complete surprise. A Selkathi doctor named Rena discovered that the Velthar healing technology could regenerate damaged tissue at the cellular level. What humans thought were weapon systems were actually medical bays designed to repair injuries that would be fatal by current standards. The technology could potentially eliminate most diseases and extend lifespans across all species. Yunji led the team studying the ship's propulsion systems. They discovered that the Velthar hadn't just achieved faster-than-light travel. They had learned to fold space itself, making journeys that took weeks in conventional ships possible in hours. The implications for trade, exploration, and colonization were enormous. But the most important discovery came from the ship's central archives. Taeyang, working with a team of linguists and cryptographers, finally cracked the deepest data layers. What they found changed everything humanity thought about the Velthar. The ancient race hadn't disappeared. They had transcended physical form, evolving into beings of pure energy that existed in higher dimensions. Before leaving, they had scattered their technology across the galaxy as tests for younger species. The Iron Lotus was one of many ships, each containing different knowledge waiting to be found by species worthy of the legacy. Jiwan presented the findings to the Research Council. The Velthar wanted to see if younger species could work together, could see value in what seemed worthless, could build instead of destroy. The Iron Lotus was left to corrode intentionally. Only a species willing to work that hard, to refuse to give up, would earn its secrets. The archives contained coordinates to other Velthar sites scattered across the galaxy. Each site specialized in different technology. One focused on terraforming and environmental restoration. Another held advances in artificial intelligence and consciousness transfer. A third contained methods for peaceful energy generation that could power entire civilizations. Daeho proposed a new organization, the Galactic Collaborative Research Initiative. Its headquarters would be the Iron Lotus, and its mission would be to find and study the other Velthar sites. Every species could participate, contributing their strengths and sharing the benefits. The proposal passed the Galactic Council with overwhelming support. Even the Kravik voted in favor, seeing an opportunity to rebuild their reputation. The age of hoarding technology was over. A new age of cooperation was beginning. Humanity found itself in an unexpected role. They became the guardians of the Velthar legacy, not through conquest or superior technology, but through the simple refusal to quit. The trait that made them seem stubborn and foolish to other species became their greatest strength. Inspired by the Iron Lotus, human engineers began designing new ships using hybrid Velthar human technology. The first was the Steel Chrysanthemum, an exploration vessel built specifically for finding and studying the remaining Velthar sites. Hana supervised its construction, applying everything learned from restoring the original ship. Minji took on a new role as head of security training for the initiative. She taught defensive tactics to security forces from multiple species, emphasizing protection over aggression. The dimensional weapons technology was classified and secured, to be used only if absolutely necessary. The galaxy had seen what it could do. That demonstration was enough. Sangwoo retired from military consulting and became the initiative's chief strategist. But instead of planning battles, he planned expeditions. His tactical mind was perfect for organizing safe and efficient exploration of dangerous ancient sites. 5 years after finding the derelict in the Corinth Nebula, Daeho stood on the bridge of the Iron Lotus and barely recognized it. The corroded hull had been fully restored, gleaming under the lights of dozens of research vessels. The interior was alive with activity, scientists and engineers from across the galaxy working together. Young Kyung, no longer young, had become the initiative's chief scientist. He oversaw research teams studying everything from medicine to faster-than-light travel. Old Minsok, who had sworn to die before leaving the ship unfinished, now taught shipbuilding classes to students from 40 different species. His workshop was always full. Taeyang received a transmission from Earth that morning. The Seoul government was naming a new university after the crew of the Iron Lotus. It would focus on xenoarchaeology, cross-species engineering, and what they were calling persistent science, the study of solving problems through determination and unconventional thinking. Hana laughed when she heard the name. Persistent science. They're making stubbornness into an academic discipline. Why not? Daeho said with a smile. It got us this far. Through the view screen, he could see the Steel Chrysanthemum preparing to depart on its first mission. The crew was mixed species, humans working alongside Selkathi, Varine, even a few Kravik who had volunteered. They would search for the next Velthar site, and whatever they found would be shared with everyone. Bora stopped by the bridge to deliver her weekly report. The ship's systems were running at 98% efficiency, better than they had ever achieved. The hybrid technology was stable and well understood now. Teams across the galaxy were building their own versions, each adapted to their species' strengths. "We did it," she said simply. "We really did it." Deho thought about the rusted derelict they had found 5 years ago. The ship that everyone called worthless. The project that the galaxy mocked as human foolishness. He remembered the volunteers who came from across human space, willing to work for nothing just to be part of something bigger than themselves. He remembered the 12 who died defending what they built. "We turned garbage into hope," he said quietly. Jiwan was organizing a memorial ceremony for the next day, 5 years since the discovery, and it had become an annual event. Representatives from dozens of species would attend, honoring not just the Iron Lotus crew, but the principle they represented. The idea that anything could be restored, anything could be saved if you refused to give up on it. That evening, Deho took a walk through the ship's corridors. He passed laboratories where researchers studied Velthar medicine. He walked through the gardens where botanists grew hybrid plants using ancient agricultural techniques. He visited the workshop where Minseok was teaching a class of young engineers how to work with living metal. In the observation deck, he found Yoonji and Junho planning their next project. They wanted to build a mobile repair station using Velthar technology, something that could restore damaged ships in the field. The applications for disaster relief were obvious. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed it, not through war or conquest, but by refusing to accept that something was worthless just because others said it was. They had found value where everyone else saw only rust and decay. The Iron Lotus hummed around him, alive and vibrant, once left to corrode in a forgotten nebula. It was now the heart of galactic cooperation and progress. Its weapons, built to erase enemies from existence, were locked away and guarded. Its knowledge, meant to uplift and teach, was shared freely. Deho returned to the bridge and sat in his captain's chair one last time.